Okay, we're in the middle of the 7th verse of Genesis, first chapter of Bereshis, and the verse is describing that in creation is made a separation between one level of water and another, which, if you're looking from an energy perspective, it's a separation between a higher level and a lower level, between different flows of energy, and therefore a rakia is made. They call firmament, but it's not really a firmament. We call it, it's more like a sponge. We call it a filter because it filters one level of energy to another in creation so that things can exist and flow properly. So this verse basically is giving more definition in the creation, even though it's still very abstract. If you just read the verse, you don't really know what it's talking about. It's talking about just raw energy, different levels of types of raw energy. And it's a very powerful flow, and because it's very powerful, it's still indefinable in physical terms. Uh, but it's all guided by the wisdom in the creation that Hashem put there. And the firmness comes into play so that the energy can be defined. In order for us to exist, these energies have to have a definition because that definition gives them a limitation, a way they can be used. If something's not defined, we can't really use it. Because we have a lot of things in life like that. We don't know what it is. It just is, and most people won't accept it because you cannot define it. You can say, I feel something, but you can't define it, so who's going to believe you? So by creating definitions, it allows it to be more palatable and acceptable. Even if the definition doesn't actually describe what it is, but it's a way to relate to it. And I guess in a certain way, with our imaginations and a lot of terms we have, we relate to things that don't exist, that do exist. We create terms for things. And even if they don't exist, because we create terms, on some level they exist. It's a fantasy, but it exists in the world of fantasy. People make movies and millions of dollars on a fantasy. So the basic thing is they make money. So there is something, a reality to it, but as far as the creation is concerned, it still needs definitions. And in this verse, the aspect or the element of a filter is conceived, and this distinguishes or separates everything within the surge and flow of the energy of creation. And the backdrop to it could be music, colors, a myriad of combinations of creative forces which are all involved here. So the purpose for definition here is because the Creator knows what ultimately has to exist, so the Creator creates definitions for that purpose, for the end result. So there are many different applications of this idea. One of the things I saw interesting is that sometimes people say things to press someone's buttons, or sometimes certain things. You hear a certain word, you see a certain thing, and you react to it. It presses your buttons. Because, why? It presses one person's and not another's is because there's something in you that reacts to it. And so in a certain way, these terminologies are also here so that when creation develops and goes further, when certain terms are used, it presses the buttons that brings out a memory of something that once was, something that exists somewhere in creation. Sometimes we meet people, we know things, and we know it's familiar, but we don't remember anything in this life. How is it familiar? How do I know it? It's because something connects with something from a previous life, from another level in space, from another level internally, in your heart and soul, in your mind. So there are certain things that press our buttons. Some are external, we know why, and other things we don't know why, but they bring up memories, they bring up connections. So In a certain same vein, the words used here often bring up something in people. People relate to these words, and so they relate to the creation in some way, even if they don't know what they're talking about or actually what it is. That's a term. And people like to feel they have control and understanding because they have a term. Which takes you back to people saying things all the time and not really knowing what they're saying, all the aspects of the word of what they're using. Anyway, so this verse in life is about becoming familiar with boundaries and distinctions, and it's often, in order to know these boundaries and distinctions, the way we come to it is through a learning process and often painful experience. Here in the creation, it's just being created. There's nothing seemingly painful about it, but in life, there are a lot of boundaries we don't know until we experience it. So we can have the wisdom, we could know that you don't cross these boundaries, we could know why, but many times people do cross those boundaries, do it, and only afterwards they understand why you don't do it. So walls that we have are used to protect people. The words are used to create recognition of things, so you know what you're up against at times, but they can also cause problems and separate a person from their own purity. So on one hand, you could have a pure heart and a pure mind, but because other people need words and terms, you start using words and terms and they dilute the feeling you have. It makes it intellectual. Instead of just being pure heart, you're now intellectualizing it. You're taking it away from that purity. And so it dilutes it. It dilutes it for a purpose, but it's still diluting, and it's not that pureness anymore. And in the same way, relating to the Creator with a pureness doesn't have a description. But for it to have an existence, it needs a description. So, for example, there's no description in Judaism for the Creator. No beginning, no end, no form, no shape. And yet people use terms, God, Creator, whatever terms they use, they're all descriptions because the person needs to hold on to something. It's very hard to describe something that doesn't have a description. So we use it, but people often get caught up in the description and get stuck in it. It means this, it means that, it means that. It doesn't mean any of that. But it's where people get stuck at. So this verse 7 is an internal separation between the pure inner self and the external inner self. It's still all within the Creator, in the Creator's mind. But in the mind, the Creator creates an inner self and external, two places. One that stays within, that pureness just stays there within, and then is how it goes forward. So there's it protects, in a sense, the pureness. So you still have the pure heart, because this is the mind, the description for people. You don't get caught into it. You let people have the description. You'll say it for people because that's how they get it. But you don't get caught into it, so you keep you keep separate from it. And that is an idea in this verse. Now, just a few more aspects of the verse itself, a few more explanations. It begins and the word and is interesting to observe the thought in creation and how the thought has journey and how it takes a more solid application as the thought develops. The terminology takes the thought and makes it more solid. So in your mind there are different levels also of thought. And it's set up. It now has a reality that can be used for creation. That's why Vayas, it wasn't made because it's not a physical thing so much. It's set up for the creation. So while normally the simple translation is made, I've used the word set up because it's a setup for something. And the word S, which is not translated, we've translated to mean in all its details. Beforehand, everything existed is a very general life force, and now with details it becomes clarified things that are needed for the expression. So it's set up by power boundaries in all the details, the filter, and it distinguishes. There's no separation yet, just distinction. The distinction itself causes separation, but it doesn't actually separate at this point. There's a current, it's not just a flow, but even more than that, it's the desire of the Creator giving life for this existence which comes through everything here. And then we say there's that which is lower and that which is covering. The sentence first mentions lower, then it mentions higher. Although the energy of creation is on a higher level, the end result of the desire of that creative energy is a lower level. So if you want to know why desire brings you to a lower level, why people get lost in desire, it's because that's how the Creator made it. With desire, everything becomes lower. The desire of the Creator is in the lowest, is to create the lower beings and the lower energies and elements. So that's why with desire, it takes us to low places, but it connects us with the Creator in those places, and that's how we can connect with the Creator sometimes, is through being low. Not depressed from being low, but just being low and realizing that once you're low, the only way to go is up. And that happens many times. So a few more things just additional to the words. All the creation is called, this creation we have is called Mayim Tachtonim, lower waters. Kabbalistically, the previous verse, Yihirakia, is that which is above, between, above Atzilus and Chachma. That's the two higher levels. And Vayas Rakia, which is this verse, is between Atzilus and Biyah, the lower levels. So that's in spiritual worlds. The previous verse is a higher worlds, and this is lower. The Rakia stands between. It says Vayas Lakim Es Rakia, and Lakim, the power boundary, set up the Rakia, the filter. The Rakia stands between the letters Aleph and Tov. Vayas Lakim Aleph to Tov, between Aleph and Tov, Rakia. From A to Z, God put everything in the middle of it. The Aleph is the first letter, Tov is the last, and Rakia represents the middle, the filter, which is the Mem. Aleph is the giver, where everything starts. Tov is the receiver, it's at the end. And Mem is the middle, which joins the receiver and the giver. And together, Aleph, Tov, and Mem is Emes, truth. Now, if the Zohar says a very interesting thing, if not for the Rakia, then the Mayim, then all the waters of the world would be frozen with salt. Very interesting. Salt. Yep, the salt would be frozen. It says the amount of salt in Sefer Pliya in the water is filtered through the Rakia. You know, when you have a salt shaker, that salt shaker, the salt itself, if it just had salt, it would all be congealed. It would stay together. They have to put another thing in there to allow it to stay, and to be able to shake it, and to come through. So the same things with a few other products, that in order for it not to stick together, they put in something else, whatever it is. Silicone. And a lot of people don't realize they're eating silicone, but that's okay. It's food grade. Food grade preservative. Okay. So it's very interesting that it says the oceans would all freeze. The salt wouldn't be able to separate in the water, and it would congeal the water if it wasn't filtered through the rakia. So just like physically, you need something to keep something flowing, as the salt or whatever. So the same thing spiritually, you need elements to keep things flowing. And so the rakia achieves that. It's a filter that allows the physical to flow as well. It's a spiritual correspondent to it. I found that interesting. It's you don't normally hear about it happening in the spiritual realms, nor do you often think about the free flowing things that we have, how they are like that. Anyway, um, I'll just tell a story at the end of the verse. So I'll tell an interesting story. There was once a man who came to a hotel. People often go to a hotel, and he came to the front desk and he asked for a paper. And the desk attendant asked the person, "Are you a guest at the hotel?" I guess the guest gets it free. If not a guest, you pay for the paper. And the man responded, "No, I'm not a guest. I'm paying $200 a day." When you pay, you're not a guest anymore. They call you a guest, but you paid. What kind of thing is that? Right. Right. So we're all guests here on earth, but the conditions that we live in, we pay for being here. And we often don't. We pay with sweat, with tears, with the difficulties. The thing we pay by being part of a family, by being part of a community, society, everything. There's a cost with everything. You can run away from one community or one family, but you go to another place that has its issues. But, yeah, same, different. Whatever. There are people who try to run away from their issues, and the issues just follow them. So but we often don't realize that we're paying for everything. As free as we are, we're paying, in one way or another. So here is another very interesting story. There was once a poor woman who dwelled in a hut at the edge of a city. So she was, those times there was a forest around the city, so the edge of the city would be by the forest, by the trees. And she was poor and couldn't really support herself, so she ended up knocking on doors to ask people, beg people, I guess, for a donation, whatever, to help get some food. And normally, when you give someone money, the person would say thank you. That's a normal response. What she would say is whatever a person does, it's being done to them. They're doing it to themselves. It's a very strange thing. You give someone money, you say whatever whatever a person does, they're doing it to themselves. What exactly did she mean? But no one really bothered. The people were interested in giving her. They weren't interested in figuring it out, so no one really bothered her. One day she's walking the streets, and she came near the palace, and the queen happened to be around wherever she was, and so the queen gave her something, and I gave her whatever, and she said the same thing. Whatever a person does to their own self, it's being done. And the queen also thought it was strange, but hey, it's a lot of strange people say strange things. Doesn't matter. After a period, the woman returned to the palace for another donation, and this time the queen gave her a little bit more than before. Again, the woman repeated the same strange words. This made the queen very angry, because they just didn't make any sense. And when the woman left, she said to her attendants, "I want you to bake a cake for this woman," and told the baker to put poison in it, so that next time the woman comes, we'll give her the cake, and she'll eat it, and she'll die quickly. The baker made the cake, and the queen put it away. I was there for a while, and one day the woman came back again. The queen gave her a donation and said, "I'm giving you a cake which I prepared for you." The woman was, wow, the queen's giving me a cake? Well, she said, whatever a person does, it's being done to them. They're doing it for themselves. Leaving the palace, the woman was very ecstatic. She got a cake from the queen, very special. So she came home and she decided that she doesn't want to eat it yet because she wants to enjoy just looking at it. If I eat it, I can't see it. She couldn't take pictures, so she decided she'll just put it away for now. And she left it there for a few days so she could look at it and just enjoy looking at it before eating it. During this time, it happened that a son of the queen decided to go hunting. At the end of the day, he was exhausted and hungry, and as he came out of the forest, he saw this little house, and he went in to have something to eat. So the woman was, the prince is here. She was really overjoyed and said, I have something for you. Your mother baked, had a cake baked for me. I'll give you some of this cake. And the prince ate the cake, and sure enough, the prince died. And the woman was very upset because the prince died in front of her, and she was confused. How did this happen? So she ran to the queen to tell her what happened. When the queen heard it, she fainted. And after the queen was revived, she said, now I see that what you say makes sense, because my own actions caused my son's death. And from that day, the woman didn't have to go begging. She had the rest of her life, the queen supported her. Which, a simple lesson is that when a person reacts to something, a person has to reflect their actions. When you do something, you have to reflect what you're doing. Someone asks something, someone does, you have to understand, not just do things, but have an understanding of why you're doing things, what you're doing. The woman was a messenger from Hashem, from the Creator, to tell people to pay attention to what they do, because what they do comes back to them. And now that the woman had fulfilled the lesson which she had to teach the queen, she didn't have to do that anymore, because her purpose of teaching the queen that lesson was fulfilled. So therefore she was supported the rest of her life and didn't have to beg anymore. And so too we in life, we do things, and once we've learned the lesson, we don't need to do those things anymore, and we go on to the next thing. And if everyone would accomplish the task of what they have to do, we'd have instant peace. And this is also in the spiritual realms. Everything has its purpose, its task, and once it's done, everything falls into place and comes together. And so while we read the verse and we don't really know what it's talking about, we try to understand it, analyze it. But if we accept this is what God's doing, and God knows what He's doing in previous verse, this one, the next one, then everything can fall into place. We don't always have to understand it, we have to accept it, that it's truthful and it's right. Then when we need to know it, it will be there. And you don't have to have a negative experience because you accepted it. I'd like to share also something that came up this week with Nechai Sarah. But earlier in the week, I get different questions from people all around the world on different subjects. And also on Torah a lot, of course. So there was a question that someone asked. We have circumcision, a bris. And today also my nephew had a circumcision, had a bris. So, thank you very much. So, we say the Jewish people have a circumcision. When we do a bris, it's to remember the covenant, the bris, the circumcision that God told Abraham to do. So the question was, do the Bnei Yishmael, the children of Yishmael, the Arabs are not Bnei Yishmael, and people of Islam are not Bnei Yishmael. Bnei Yishmael are people who are from Yishmael. The fact that you take on Islam doesn't mean you are Bnei Yishmael. So do the children of Ishmael have to circumcise themselves or not? Do the children of Keturah have to circumcise themselves or not? Abraham says he took another wife, her name was Keturah, and had children. And even if Ishmael and the sons of Keturah had to circumcise themselves, what about future generations? To nowadays, anyone from that family, are they commanded by Torah to circumcise themselves? I found it a very interesting question, because I would never have thought, why would anyone have to circumcise themselves? It was given to Abraham for the Jewish people as a covenant, for the Zerah of Avraham, And why would anyone have to? I mean, sure, you want to, you can do it. But why would it be a mitzvah? And someone suggested, which even surprised me, that you have to force Bnei Yishmael and Bnei Keturah to do it because it's a mitzvah for them, which didn't make much sense to me either. That a mitzvah to have a bris for Goyim?
Before Matan Torah, they were not Muslim.
Well,
they just did it because it was, they had, what, it was the private.
Well, the question is the circumcision that Hashem told Avraham just for him and his family? In other words, he circumcised whoever was family, Ishmael, the son of Torah, and only applied to them and to no one else? Or does it apply to all their future generations?
Future generations because of Matan Torah.
Well, so if you say, well, the question is, at Matan Torah, we were told to do the bris. So there's two things. There's a bris that Hashem told Avraham to circumcise everyone of his household, which included a lot of non-Jewish people. He had servants and things, everyone was circumcised. But that then, it only applies to them, it doesn't go on to future generations. If they leave the household, they don't have to, or they're not part of it. Then there's the children of Avraham, which goes only till Matan Torah. Then there is the idea of Zerah, that all your seed have to have a circumcision. Then it would apply for always. But the thing is that so if you say that God told him not just your household, but all your seed and future generations, then it would apply to anyone that was born from Avram as a father. But then you have the bris at Matan Torah. From Matan Torah, we do a circumcision not just because of Avraham, we do a circumcision also because Hashem told us to do it. So there are actually two things here. There's one, the bris from Avraham, and one from when the Torah was given. And there is a difference. The difference is, the purpose of circumcision is removing a physical foreskin. The other part of circumcision is to remove the blockage of the heart, to circumcise the blockage of the heart, a spiritual circumcision. At Matan Torah in the desert, when Hashem told us to continue and to do the circumcision, have a bris, it was both a physical bris and the spiritual bris. So when you do a physical bris, it also removes the aras halev, the blockage in the heart. That is something that doesn't apply to anyone in the family of Avram. If you were doing it because your family is seed and you're not part of the Jewish people, you don't have that element there of removing aras halev.
In the spiritual.
The spiritual part of it.
They don't have physical one.
Well, that's questionable. No. Yes.
He said spiritual and physical.
But is the Torah commanding that these non-Jewish people should have it or not? If you're not Jewish and you come from Abraham, does that command to Abraham apply to you to circumcise yourself?
Is it indicated in the Torah that what's the verse say?
There's
Is there anything in the passage that would indicate what you're saying?
Yeah, it depends how you understand the verses. If you understand, which most people understand, that it applies only to the household of Abraham, then it's not a question. Okay, but if you understand that it applies to the seed of Abraham, which is also in the pasuk, all the seed, yeah, it says Zerah. So Zerah Shaberach Hashem Lekecha. So if you understand that it means just the seed of the people born in his family, it's one thing, which is what most understand. But if you understand that the seed means the continual seed, then it applies to Bnei Keturah as well, and Bnei Yishmael. So there is an opinion that says it does apply to Bnei Keturah, but the consensus is not like that. Because the main aspect of why we do a bris is not because Avraham did it, because at Matan Torah we were commanded, and it has a spiritual aspect to it. And so I never really thought much about it, but because I was asked this week, I thought a little bit about it. I had to look at it. And there's a little bit of discussion about what the bris achieves. So if you hold that the bris of Avraham is only a physical, the circumcision of Matan Torah is a physical and spiritual. The circumcision by Avraham is only a physical. It's not there to remove Aros Halev. Therefore, it could still be that the future generations of Bnei Keturah or Yishmael still need to do a physical circumcision, even though it doesn't have the spiritual. But that's not as a command of Torah because it doesn't come from Matan Torah. It comes just as an inheritance of what their ancestors did. So it's not a mitzvah for them, but they can do it if they wish to. So
why Yishmael had his bris milah at 13 years of age?
Because he was 13 when Hashem commanded Abraham to do. He was 13.
Already 13.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So really, then the next generation would have to do it the same thing.
Well, no. Yitzchak did it then, but they can do it whenever they want. The Torah doesn't command them at what age to do it.
Only Matan Torah.
Right, which has to do with the spiritual aspect of bris. But by them it was just a physical aspect, and therefore it's not relevant to mitzvah or Matan Torah. I just found
it have a spiritual aspect. What is the purpose of the bris to begin with?
That's an interesting question, and
what are you doing? You're making an improvement on the body. Every mitzvah has a spiritual, and if it's a mitzvah, then it has a spiritual component to it. But just to cut the oral just like this is what.
Well,
it's healthy.
I'll tell you something more interesting. In the 40 years that the Jews traveled through the wilderness, they didn't do a circumcision. They didn't have a bris. They didn't do it for 40 years. And that's why we find that before Joshua took them into the land, he circumcised all the people. So the question is, how is it that if it's so important, they didn't do it? They were protected from the sun. They were protected from the elements. They could have done it. They didn't do it.
That's after Matan Torah.
After Torah is given, they didn't keep the Torah mitzvahs in the wilderness.
Why was that?
That's a good question. So why is it they didn't do? Why didn't they do the circumcision? That people don't. Why didn't they do circumcision in the desert? Is because the spiritual level they were at was very open. It didn't need the idea of removing blockage of the heart because it was a level where the hearts were open. So they didn't need to do a physical thing to create a spiritual counterpart of removing the blockage of the heart because the hearts weren't blocked.
When you say blockage of the heart, what are you talking about exactly?
It says in the prophets that in the future when Mashiach comes, the blockages in people's heart will be removed. There's a blockage from seeing the Creator. There are a lot of things we have, pain that blocks us, all different things.
And we're born with it.
What? We're born with that, basically. Yeah. So the blockage, it says, will be removed from everyone, and the impurities will be removed from.
Why? What's the purpose of having the blockage to begin with?
The purpose of the blockage.
Why God created man in such a.
Well, apparently, in order for us to have the life that we have, the world that we have, the convoluted world and the confused world, and to create a religion out of confusion. Confucius. So in order to do this, we had to have blocked hearts. If everyone was open, everyone would be peaceful, the journey that we go through would not exist. So for whatever reason we have to go through a journey, we have to be blocked in order to go through this painful journey, which we believe will come out good in the end.
So in other words, that gives it free will. Blockage. Without the blockage, you would see godliness.
You have no free will.
You wouldn't have no free will.
Mm-hmm.
Since you have a blockage, then you have to overcome that blockage.
Right. It gives you a choice. It gives you a choice. If you see the choice.
Well, a lot of it's based on you believe it.
Right. So this is another interesting part of something I saw this week in the parasha.
That was sort of
So this is the end of verse 7. Next week, God willing, we'll start with the 8th verse, and then we'll continue.
Thank you.